Welcome to the meeting of the Scrutiny Board for Environment, Housing and Communities. My name is Councillor Stuart Goulton and I am chairing the meeting today, and I will now go around the table to introduce the other members of the board.
Good morning everybody, my name is Councillor Abdul Hanan for Headingley and High Park.
Hello, I'm Councillor Kate Haig, representing Farnley and Wortley Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Eleanor Thompson, Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
Good morning, folks. Councillor Adrian McCluskey, Farnley and Wortley Ward.
Yes, hello everyone. Councillor Dowson, Chapel Allerton Ward.
Good morning, Craig Timmins. I'm Councillor for Carvely and Farsley, and I am a substitute today.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor David Jenkins from Killingbeck and Seacroft, and I'm substituting for Karen Renshaw.
Good morning, Councillor Annie Maloney, Beeston Holbeck Ward.
Morning everyone, Councillor Lou Cunningham, Armley Ward.
Good morning everybody, Councillor Norma Harrington, Wetherby Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlan Wharfdale Ward.
Thank you very much, and first of all our gratitude to all those people who are substituting today for members that can't make it. And just for information, we have Becky Atherton as our Chief Scrutiny Advisor supporting us today throughout the meeting. So we'll now move on to the business items of the agenda, or rather the formal ones. So item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Item 2, there are no items which are excluded from the public, so we don't have to put ourselves in camera. Late items of business, there are no late items of business. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest from members present? No, thank you very much. And now we'll move on to apologies. They've already been noted in terms of who substituted, but that means that we don't have our regular attendees, who are Councillor Shaf Ali and Councillor Karen Renshaw. So now we'll move on to the minutes. Do we have any comments on the minutes? Are we happy to accept them as a correct record of the meeting? Can I please have a proposer, Councillor Haig, and a seconder? Councillor McCluskey, thank you very much. And now we'll move on to the work programme. There is something to note from the work programme, which is that we won't be having the recycling paper that we were expecting in March. However, the items on the agenda for March are pretty substantial, so we will have plenty to discuss. And of course, it is better to have a report which has all the information that we hope to have, and we have been promised that that will have extra value by having it in the next political year after May, if we're all happy with that suggestion. Do we have any further comments on the work programme? Okay, thank you. And we will now move into our first substantial item of business for today. We do have a lot of people on my list, and I haven't got my glasses on yet, so I can't check to see whether they are there. Hi. But I will read out the names that we're expecting in attendance today to discuss the fantastic work that the third sector does within the City of Leeds, and also for us to take its temperature in terms of its resilience in some very testing times that we have in public services. So, first of all, we have Pip Goff from Volition.
Just waiting for Pip.
She's going to arrive a little bit later. We have Anna Martin from Voluntary Action Leeds. We have Councillor Asghar Khan, who is the executive member. We have James Rogers, who is the director responsible for looking after the third sector within the city. Paul Money, who is the chief officer for Stronger, Safer Communities. Mark Charlton, yes, we do, who is head of community safeguarding. Andy Birkbeck, who is the new head of community relations and cohesion and is keen to impress us today. And we have Samantha Powell, who is third sector and migration partner manager. Carmel Langstaff, who is ready and on call, who looks after transformation and innovation, and Ashley Lucas, who is responsible for employment and skills, also to be available for us should we need. Right, so I've introduced the participants. Does somebody want to introduce the item? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. It gives me great pleasure. I've been working over many years with the third sector organisation and the community groups across Leeds, and they are amazing organisation, and they are the backbone to our city, and they are delivering the ambition, and also they are making sure we are tackling the inequality, supporting well-being, strengthening neighbourhood and champion and the voice of local people. And it's the partnership, and in Leeds we've got over 3,000 third sector organisations and over 31,500 volunteers in our city doing an amazing job looking after our residents. And the partnership with Leeds City Council and the third sector organisation is brilliant, and we are looking forward to working with them as well. And I'll hand it over to who's going to be leading on this one then? Mark.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Thank you. The report is quite lengthy, and actually it's hard to believe it's been a year already since we came and we presented the report last year. What members will see is that there has been a significant amount of work undertaken over the last 12 months. The third sector is a critical part of the city's infrastructure, and the work that is being done is part of an ongoing 5-year strategy in terms of the third sector strategy, which was developed by Third Sector Leeds. And I think Third Sector Leeds being an independent sort of board made up of partners and key reps means that that is driven by the third sector, not necessarily by local authority. The local authority is a key stakeholder in that, but actually we're not necessarily the driving force behind that. And I think that shows the strength of relationships between the wider sector as identified by Councillor Khan. What I don't want to do is go through all of the report section by section. I know Anna's got a few prepared notes in terms of the value of the third sector, and it would be useful if we could hear from Anna and Pip around some of the work that's been done and also around what they value in the third sector. So if I could ask Anna just to say a few.
Hi there, Anna Martin, relatively new Chief Executive of Voluntary Action Leeds. It's fair to say that it has been another very challenging and difficult but very positive year in the third sector. I think the report speaks to itself, and in fact I was just commenting before that it's quite staggering when you go through the amount of activity that's actually going on. Sometimes you sort of forget because you're in the midst of it all. Absolutely echo comments about relationships with council. Been fantastic since I've been in. I think really respectful of the engagement with non-council conveners for Leeds Ambitions. I think that's a fantastic show of joint partnership working, both with the third sector and obviously other organisations. A lot of the work that we do within the third sector is sort of absolutely almost written out of those objectives, particularly the thriving one that I'm convening. Volunteering continues to be extremely strong. We know that we're a further year into the strategy, having been launched and building on that all the time. Similarly with third sector leaders and the coordinated meeting that we then have with third sector partners, some really vital conversations going on with a really broad range of leaders from across the sector. We are obviously mobilising the new ISR contract for the next few years, and very much appreciate the ability to plan ahead. To have at least three years funding is very significant in terms of workforce, and us able to deliver as much as we possibly can. We are obviously, as we enter that new contract, looking at how all these mechanisms work and seeing what we can do to make them even more impactful and efficient with our partners. Volition and Leeds All the People's Forum. And yeah, we continue to just try to do the best to bring together this huge amount of work that's going on within the sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to questions from the panel. Did you want to speak?
Oh, thank you. Well, just whether it's worth just saying a little bit about the sort of state of the sector. I know that was kind of the report that this scrutiny board had been particularly interested to see. So you'll see you've got all of the detail of that in the papers. I suppose it's just kind of really important to sort of highlight some of the kind of key findings of the state of the sector, which show that despite the rising demand and stretched resources that Anna's touched on and the difficult and challenging times that we're in, we have got an incredible third sector across the city that continues to demonstrate exceptional resilience, adapting and evolving to sustain vital support across our diverse communities. I mean, I can talk in some detail about that if you'd like, or perhaps, Councillor, if you'd rather go to questions, that's obviously fine.
Well, thanks, Pip. I appreciate that you're all very involved in actually making stuff happen most of the time. So bigging yourself up and reporting back in a sort of aggregated way is difficult because you just want stuff to make stuff better. But one of the things that we're particularly interested in as a scrutiny board is last year we took part in a community committee review, and that was supposed to ensure that we were far more responsive to localities and that we had the environment within which communities can do more for themselves and add creativity. And one of the key parts of that was the third sector. Indeed, a new council plan was approved yesterday at the council, and it said that the council will be working more locally with others at a neighbourhood level focused on local needs and priorities alongside the NHS, voluntary sector and other partners, with refreshed community committees supporting engagement and decision making. Now, from an elected member's perspective, some of that has been a little frustrating in terms of it living up to the promise that's in the strategy. And we just wondered how you feel you play a significant role within that as a third sector to do more at a locality level and be more involved in locality accountability and decision making going forward. Sorry, that was a very long introduction, but I just think that it's good to have that in the background when we're talking today with the elected members and the questions that they've got, because we want the third sector to thrive as much as possible and we want the council's infrastructure to respond to that.
So perhaps if I just pick up in terms of some of the work that's happening, obviously there's a really strong focus on communities and neighbourhoods in a whole range of different pieces of work. Obviously those community committees, but also we've got work happening around neighbourhood health, and we had a fantastic event last week at in the banqueting suite just here actually that brought together a really broad range of partners across the city, and the level of kind of engagement from all partners, you know, both the local authority and health, but also a whole breadth of third sector is really strong in that. And I think it's through some of that sort of change happening in real work and things that are happening to make kind of changes in the activity that's happening on the ground is where the third sector is very networked and linked in. I suppose your question about the kind of very specifics of neighbourhood committees, you know, we know that so many local elected councillors and, you know, so many of you that are recognised around the room are incredibly linked in and have kind of really strong local links, as well as links, you know, with the sort of really important citywide organisations like Carers Leeds and, you know, lots of organisations that are working not just across the small geographies and neighbourhoods, but for the whole city. So we see that sort of breadth, don't we, of localities and geography and how things are made up. We have our kind of communities of interest, communities of identity that span across, and lots of different third sector organisations are involved around disability or LGBT or people from black and minority communities. So we've got all of those different layers of how the sector works, and I think we're incredibly well networked as a sector, and I hope that that's how it feels to you too.
Thanks very much, Pip. Councillor Haigh.
Thank you. Sort of following on from that, I mean, it's very clear that from the report and from what we see in our work as councillors, that there is, a huge amount of depth in some parts of the city in the provision, opportunities and services. But I question whether we always have the breadth, so that people's experience and opportunities and the services that they can access do vary across the city. And how do we meet that challenge, especially as we're looking at, parts of the city are now getting Pride in Place funding, and you've got very different starting points for those communities that have that funding. How are we going to meet the challenge of, dare I use the phrase, levelling up some of that provision across the city? Yeah, let's bring it back, and making sure that wherever you live in Leeds, there is all these opportunities, services are available.
I would absolutely concur with that. I mean, we know we are going for equity, not equality. And so the spread of funding, resources, third sector organisations, infrastructure will not be equitable, and nor is the rest of the world. So I think that's fair enough to say that. But I think to some regard, it shouldn't be, because if we were going for equality, we would be looking to give everyone the same. Equity, we need to give people who need it more, because for whatever reason they are already further behind. So absolutely, I think equity is what we're aiming for. I think the Pride in Place is a really good example of where it's absolutely been encouraged from central government to get that money to communities as quickly as possible, with as least involvement from sort of council, but there's a process to go through to get that. We had a really good Pride in Place event last week in Leeds. There's been others around the country. That money is absolutely vital, but we do need to make sure it goes to the right places, and I think we absolutely see that where money is given directly to communities, it's very successfully spent and has the greatest impact. We know from LCAN, so Leeds Community Anchors, they're a network of their community counterparts, and again, very successful both in listening and delivering money to those areas. So for us in infrastructure, it's about trying to make that process as easy as possible, and I definitely have very encouraging conversations with council officers around that and continue to do so. I think we can play a really important part in that, but the message is let's get the money to the people who know how to use it best as soon as possible.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you. And before I ask my question, I'd just like to thank the third sector for the vital work they do in our communities. So there are a few figures in the report around volunteer value. And I just wonder, this is really for the council department, whether a kind of overall calculation has been made of the amounts of money that are actually provided by those volunteer hours. I did a quick calculation, but I just wonder how it stacks up against how the council see that monetary value of the volunteer input.
Thank you. I think it's really difficult to quantify the value of the third sector and the volunteering sector. The information that we've pulled together is some of the information that has been, the data that's been explored to evidence that. It can be challenging across different parts of the region and the country to be able to really quantify that, and I will defer to Pip, who really looks into the data on this as well. We do have some anecdotal information around valuing volunteering time at £14.43 per hour, and also the report from the ABCD Pathfinders that shows that social value of every pound invested delivers £36.90 and up to the value of £14.02. It's something that we are always keen to understand better. It can be challenging to really get a monetary value as well as exploring and understanding the value that is beyond economic. But Pip, you might want to add to that.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, I think putting monetary value and kind of understanding that is part of it, but we know it's so much more than that, don't we? And obviously Voluntary Action lead on the volunteering strategy, and we're really good as a city that we've thought so much about volunteering and that we've worked together between the third sector and statutory partners and others to kind of understand that. The thing I wanted to just mention is the kind of link to work and health, and we know that conversations about how people feel belonging and including and how people feel like they matter in their communities is a really important part of all of this. And one of the exciting things that has happened amidst all the difficult challenges that we've all had is we have had some good work happening around work and health, and recognising that volunteering and being able to develop employability skills is part of all of that. And some of the funding that's come through West Yorkshire Combined Authority and through the NHS is really kind of being able to build on some of the brilliant practice that we already had. So, for example, we've got places like Bramley Baths who are doing some really great work where they've sort of built on asset-based community development, some of their job coaching, but they've been able to get some additional funding. So, really kind of building those kind of things. So, yeah, I think it threads through so much of all of what we're doing. I think, yeah, we can give you the numbers, and I think I was reading from a national report that's just come out. It's 0.8% of the kind of national workforce around volunteering. It's kind of really significant kind of input to sort of national productivity. And so, yeah, we can give it figures, but we also know, don't we, that people that are volunteering and connected and feel that they matter is often the most important part of all of that.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree that the social value is you're unable to quantify that. But I'm just thinking in terms of kind of budget setting from the council's perspective, in terms of how much money is potentially being saved by volunteer hours and how our services are propped up by the third sector. I did a quick calculation from the ONS just based on the number of volunteers that Leeds purports to have of the 31,500, and I just did a calculation of based on an average of 4 hours a week. I think the national average is 4 to 6, but I thought I'll do it on the lower side of 4 hours per week, which per person is 3,000 a year, and that brings it up to around 94 million, and that's quite an eye-watering amount of money that potentially would be coming out of the council's budget. So I think, although the social value is prime importance, I think we have to recognise that amount of money, which, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. There's some good ongoing conversations around social value happening that build on the work that's already come. Some of that conversation is about how do we measure this impact, because it's not just the cost of what that's saving in terms of that employment. It's the fact that those people potentially now are engaged in something, therefore not socially isolated, therefore don't get depressed, therefore don't have conditions caused by depression and stress. Social prescribing is something like £1 spent saves £30 in NHS GP appointments, A&E, IPS employment. These are just services I've had, so I'm a bit biased, obviously, with stats I mentioned. But I think it's £6,000 a year for social care for every person that's employed. So these have huge implications on the quality of people's lives. One of the things we talked about social value is, and have really positive conversations with council members as well, is that we've got to stop using business tools to measure the social value of the third sector, because actually they don't represent at all the wider impacts. So we've got to be really careful around the tools that we use. They do show significant amounts of money being saved, absolutely, but they are a very small percentage of what is actually happening through the wider kind of determinants of health, etc. So I think it's really important that we do get those measures as accurate as possible. There's also, in every decision that we make as a third sector, a decision whether we spend money on things that will help us to measure it, or we spend money on helping people. And as money and budget shrink, we're going to make decisions about helping people rather than measuring it, always, I would say. So there has to be some recognition of that. But yeah, it goes without saying that the people that are supported by all of the organisation in Leeds absolutely value that support.
Thank you. Councillor McCluskey.
I'm almost embarrassed to mention about money again, but it relates back to the ABCD Pathfinder review. And 5 years ago, it was £1 was worth £14 and 2 in social value. It's now 5 years later, £36.90. What do you think's brought that about? Because it's improved by over it's improved 200%, over 200%. Do we know what's occurred to make that improvement?
Councillor McCluskey, are you referring to a figure in the report?
Yeah.
Which page are we on?
25.
25, thank you.
It's the third sector strategy paragraph. Oh, sorry, just above the third sector.
Hello. Just for the people on the webcast and for those present, we now have Verity O'Hara approaching the table to talk to us about that figure and how it's calculated. You might want to mention the term community power as well while you're there. Yeah.
Hi everybody. There was a number of factors. The original SROI figure was done with Leeds Beckett University, so that was like an academic research paper from 2019 to 2021, and there were specific things they weighted that measurement on, but we used the same method this time, so we asked Leeds Beckett to come back to do a review on the SROI. So the figures are quite stark in contrast, aren't they? But the measurements are based on number of connections and looking at the social wider determinants of health, as Anna's mentioned, because we felt that shows the real impact of measuring communities, not just on reporting on figures like number of volunteers or number of events that they created. It was around social connection and adding value in that way. So at the time we started the first academic study, we went into lockdown. So the data it was skewed in a sense. So they sort of did the best they could with that initial SROI. But the second one, we could be more robust with gathering the data and the intel. And they'd had 6 years of development activity in the areas we looked at in the review. And also what we found, a big outcome that came from the SRI was ripple effects. Very much what Anna and Pip are just talking about, and how we tried to capture and measure those impacts in a meaningful way. So what happened was the data became, well, it's, as you said, it's 200%. I would still say that's an underestimate of really the value in the communities. And that was from a small sample study of 6 sites. So I would hazard a guess it's probably even bigger than that figure now.
It is impressive.
Yeah. Well, it was very... Oh, right, sorry. I'm Professor Anne-Marie Baglitelli from the university. We ran the figures a few times because we were quite shocked at how high it was. But again, I'd be very tempted in a couple of years to revisit again, because I would expect, I think there's something about the questions we asked. Could they have been different questions as well? So we're always learning from that. But as I said, a big conclusion from the review was the ripple effects and that legacy that was created from funding those 6 areas. No worries.
Thanks very much. Councillor Hannan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really like this report. It's very detailed. However, there is an area that concerns me because working in the third sector. One of the key areas is, I know there's a lot of volunteering involved. However, the sector is struggling with trustees, which is a very big problem in terms of running these charities and organisations. Could we look at ways of recruiting trustees across the region and the city and create a pool of trustees based on needs for community organisations? For instance, it could be a business lead, it could be marketing, because a lot of these small organisations, especially the emerging organisations, need new talented trustees to enable them to be sustainable and resilient. I know the word resilient is mentioned quite a lot in the report, but the backbone of these organisations, guys, we know is trustees. So I know something was probably trialled a few years ago where you provided training and you provided people to apply to become a trustee. Can we look at restarting that, please? Because we do know the third sector does a lot in the city and wider, but without the trustees, without knowledgeable, trained trustees and experienced trustees, we're going to be talking about where did we go wrong. Thank you.
I absolutely agree. Trustees are so important to organisations, and there are an awful lot of people who are running themselves into the ground trying to run these small grassroots organisations with very little support. I could immediately think of a handful of people who I'm genuinely concerned about their well-being day to day of what they're having to do within their particular organisation, and trustees therefore can take some of that burden from them. I don't think that work has stopped necessarily. I would say that the conversations again around social value are highlighting how much of a need there is to link up the various anchor networks, how we need to work on improving the translation of information and need between business and the third sector. I think you have that issue from both sides. I absolutely believe that we've got businesses who want to invest time and money in their local communities. We need to give them a tool to do that very easily, and to share what it is that they can actually provide, because it isn't just money, it's time, experience. Being a trustee is an excellent example of that. But also from the other side, that community organisations know what can be given to them, what they can ask for, and there's a real disconnect of understanding there that we need to try and solve. We're doing some work soon, hopefully, regarding a sort of study on what that could look like. So there's already some work going from Voluntary Action Leeds around that. And we continue to develop the volunteering strategy with that in mind, because we see that need so clearly. Obviously, as Voluntary Action Leeds, we provide training and support around that already. And, you know, we just need to do as much of that as we possibly can. We're also looking at things, other ideas such as mentoring, etc. But, you know, it's difficult enough to achieve this stuff when you're a relatively large organisation. So imagine how hard that is for, you know, grassroots who are just trying to keep the doors open. So absolutely a real big risk, but I think something that we are tackling head on.
Thank you. Councillor Timmins.
And can I just,
sorry, Pip.
Oh.
Go ahead, Pip.
Sorry, just to add to that, thank you so much for raising Councillor Hannon. It's such an important point. We've been doing some work with trying to encourage people from statutory organisations to think about becoming trustees in the third sector, because we know it's really good learning for them and knowledge and growth around their leadership development, as well as giving back to community and understanding what it's like for third sector organisations. So we've had some really good examples of where that's been helpful. But we also need to kind of grow leadership and confidence in some of our least heard voices. As part of the Poverty Truth Commission, I've been involved in a new initiative which is looking around migrant leadership and making sure that we're creating opportunities for people from migrant communities to be able to gain confidence and see the huge value that they bring to our community. So I think there's a number of different ways, and as Anna said, Voluntary Action Leeds are doing a lot. But I thank you for reminding us, because it's something to come back to.
Councillor Hannon.
People are spot on, and let's be clear, there is so much hidden talent out there, and we need to find out where it is. But if we don't make an offer saying, look guys, this is what you're going to get in return for you giving up your 2 hours a week or whatever it is, we need to create an offer so that people can, you know, buy into it, and I think that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Timmins.
Thank you, Chair. My points actually follow on nicely from Councillor Hannan, actually. We need people within our communities willing to want to make things happen. We were talking about community committees before. We need the members on that to want to make things happen. But when people do start getting involved, going back to what you were just saying, Anna, after a while people start feeling worn out, not appreciated, and I think that's the difficulty with the retention and keeping people on at times because of that. So you have answered my question in part, but I just want to know what more we can do in terms of recognising a wider group of people for the great jobs they're doing, whether it's specific, certain part of a community or citywide, and just how we can link more of the groups in it within the communities up with yourselves at Voluntary Action Leeds, because I don't think a lot of them know that they can get that relationship with you.
Yes, I mean, staff retention is a massive issue, and it very much links to the short-term funding, which, you know, is a reason the ISR contract being 3+3 is fantastic. The reason that so many people come to work in the third sector, and I would say this is a large majority, is because they have benefited in one way or another from services that have turned their lives around, helped them, whether it's them, friends, family, whatever. And in doing so are extremely passionate, which is, you know, an absolute asset to this city. But in doing so, they are constantly re-triggering their own trauma, and so it's a catch-22 for them, because, you know, we have a massive responsibility, therefore, to look after them as best we possibly can, and we need money in order to do that. We need better ways in to support them. I would love some of these CEOs or organisation leaders that I'm thinking of every day. I would love to be able to offer them more support than we currently can afford to do. So we need to be innovative as partners to look at that. But we also need the investment, and where the investment is so important is that it's long term, because the most common example I can give you of a problematic situation within the third sector is that these people are committing their literally their lives sometimes to this work, and then on top of that are thinking, do I have a job in 3 months? They have mortgages to pay, homes to look after, and short-term funding means that they then are worried, even more so, on top of the emotional burden of their job, often will move on to another organisation, and then what happens is you lose all of that experience from that person, and it is a continual problem that we face. Having said all of that, a lot of work has been done on workforce, so we continue to make it a massive focus, but I think long-term funding and handing over power to communities is some of the best things that we can do to support that. Did you want to speak to?
Yeah, just very briefly, in terms of workforce. So we've done a lot with the Health and Care Academy in Leeds, and just back in COVID, which feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it? But being able to get vaccinations, for example, for volunteers, and recognise that volunteers and people working in third sector organisations out in the community kind of were part of our health and care workforce was quite important. And we've been able, following that, to get additional resources. We've just been sending out some information about a new programme that's helping people kind of gain skills and recognise value. So I think training and being able to offer some of those things. We have our workforce resources, as Anna's touched on, which we make very freely available. And the new infrastructure contract with the kind of additional focus on one front door and having information really widely shared. Because I think often there are things out there, it's letting people know what there is and matching people up and just giving that message that people aren't on their own. Often it is about recognition through opportunities for peer support, things like the Compassionate City Awards, and the city as a whole kind of valuing the huge contribution that they get, I think is also important too. And, you know, thank you to the council and other colleagues who, really do help try and value that.
Thank you. Councillor Jenkins.
Yeah, I'd first of all, like to say what a brilliant report it is and how much I welcome the work of the third sector in the city, and particularly around the neighbourhood networks. As an older person's champion, how much work they do and how much they are a backbone in the community. So I think access to funding is a really critical thing. Also, the work of organisations like Health Watch, and I think we've begun to support Health Watch in a difficult situation, and I hope that the council manages to continue that work, because Health Watch is a really important organisation, I think. And the other area may be to look at is campaigning. So I think what we sometimes need to recognise how much campaigning work is done by the third sector on lots of different issues, and perhaps you could comment on that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Jenkins. As you'll know, the manifesto, the Older People's Forum, has been one of the kind of really clear examples where kind of bringing that voice across the city and championing kind of older people. We also see it we have International Day of Disabled People, and we have a number of other kind of key points in the year where we try and raise the profile and try and make sure that we're kind of bringing those needs to the fore. We also work to kind of raise issues, for example, around housing with local MPs, for example, and with others, because part of what we also recognise is some of the changes needed is at national policy level. So there have been a number of ways through the health and care hub that was championed by Tom Reardon, although he's just kind of moved on from that post, and other ways that we've been trying to use that voice. So, yeah, it is something, absolutely, as you say, that the third sector is involved with. And sometimes, yeah, it's not something that we recognise.
If I can just add to that really important point, the third sector can often have a voice that the council or officers in the council can't. But through the third sector leads breakfast meetings, which takes place with the most senior leaders in the council, through third sector partnership, we're often looking at these messaging and how we can either align our messages with that team lead's voice, or how the sector may be able to support in areas. So that's been a really key element of joining up the voice that we have together in Leeds.
Thank you. Councillor Dowson.
Yeah, it's nice to see Sam again, and I must say that the work you do on the third sector partnership is fantastic, so thank you for all you. I think you'd struggle in this room to find somebody who doesn't either volunteer or is a trustee of some kind, so we do recognise your pain, because the scourge of short-term funding really puts everybody under so much pressure, mostly on people who are employed. How do you get a mortgage? How do you rent a house if you don't know if you're going to have any money coming in 3 months' time? And whilst most organisations try to manage that, it does mean you've got an awful lot of people out there who are doing their very best under really tough circumstances for them, and they're doing a great job in doing that. So it's really great to know that we get £36.90 worth of benefit from every pound. But what happens when you don't get that pound? And I'm thinking particularly around community committees, because our funding that we have, and I've sat on our funding group for many years now, and it's really difficult because you're having to say no to organisations you've said yes to previously. And it hurts not being able to support those organisations. So I'm just wondering if Voluntary Action Leeds and Third Sector Partners can tell us how they are trying to manage this change in funding and how it's coming in, because it's very targeted and doesn't leave room for the imagination of the organisation to react to their community's needs the best, because it's very prescriptive. And then secondly, so I won't come back again, is on social prescribing. I'm hugely disappointed often in social prescribing, because I think it's a fantastic offer. You hear doctors say time and time again that people present to them not because they're ill, but because they're lonely or they've got issues that can be dealt with by volunteering or working in the community or activities that are provided by third sector groups. But often that comes from the health service with no funding. And I'm just wondering what kind of thinking outside the box pressure we can put, because each social prescriber is actually employed by the doctor's surgery. And if that doctor's surgery don't buy into this great offer, it makes a very fragmented offer, and one that really every surgery should offer, because I think it is this fantastic offer. So thank you, Chair.
I will recognise the bias of what I'm about to say as the former Linking Leeds service manager, but I couldn't agree more in regards to social prescribing. We know, because there is a wealth of research behind it, about the absolute savings that social prescribing make when done well and done as it is meant to be done. So unfortunately, despite very evident results, the initial, when the contract of Lincoln Leeds came up, the initial decision was to actually stop funding. And thankfully, because we had so much information around the measures of how it really had impacted, we were able to secure that, but at a drastic reduction. And therefore you lost an awful lot of people. And bear in mind that these people were already paid less than their NHS counterparts. Now, I absolutely agree. One of the most tough battles in terms of social prescribing is getting people who believed in the medical model for a very long time to switch to a more social model. But actually, when they realise the value, they absolutely start referring to social prescribing. The issue that you mentioned in terms of the amount of social prescribers we have working in GP surgeries, you're absolutely right. There's more of those now than ever, but they are individual businesses. The work that those social prescribers do are often fantastic, so please don't take this as a sweeping statement, but often are not doing social prescribing, are flagged in to do all sorts of other things. There is no oversight to their work, sort of from a funding level, because each individual surgery can decide to spend their money however they wish. And that in itself means that you have this hugely powerful potential often wasted because they're picking up other things because of the pressures of the NHS. But you know, the money is there, the brilliant work is there. I just think it's how that money is spent is really important. And I know that obviously things have been extremely difficult for the NHS, so I can understand why certain decisions would be made. But it is a great example of where you actually give that money directly to community third sector services, and it will be spent very, very efficiently. In terms of lack of funding and how we support people, I mean, it is amazing that as a third sector we've continued to survive and thrive in many cases, but I also know people who are, setting up organisations in their communities who are not paying themselves anything and often have closed, actually. We haven't lost as many as I think we thought we probably would have done with the national insurance increases and cost of living, electricity, all of those things going up, but we are losing important resources, and sometimes the third sector is picking up those resources at great stress and cost to them personally. So you've got third sector organisations also having to supplement the work that they're doing when they're actually contracted to do it. So there isn't a simple answer to it, but I think what we need to try and do is work together as partners as efficiently as we can to increase our offer over the next few years as best we can, but we're under the same conditions as a lot of the third sector organisations themselves.
If I could just mention as well, I think there's a whole kind of journey, isn't there, from small organisations and individuals kind of wanting to do something, perhaps getting a small pot of funding from Leeds Community Foundation or one of your community committees, or from asset-based community development funding, and then actually being able to establish the evidence of the impact. So we've done a lot of work, and we've got a report called the Gold Dust Report, which pulls together some of the real impact that some of the community mental health transformation funding has been able to evidence the value of using small organisations and organisations that are rooted in communities to address, in this case, quite severe mental illness issues. So there's a whole kind of route in which trying to build that evidence to in order to get more long-term sustainable funding. And then one of the big things that I'm sure you'll be very aware of with the new NHS 10-year plan, we're shifting for funding will sit in the provider collaborative in the city. So the ICB, the Integrated Care Board, and the sort of system of NHS that we have had is about to go into a year of significant transition. But that will mean more of the resource is in a system conversation, so that between NHS and local authority and the third sector and GPs, we can collectively allocate resource. And please be assured that we're fighting really hard to make sure the third sector has a place and a voice in that space, because we know it's only by shifting resource into community and away from, it's that shift away from treatment to prevention and from hospital to community. So as part of all of this journey, we need that sustainable funding for the third sector. But it's a gradual process. And we see, going back to the earlier question about areas where there isn't much activity, I think Seacroft's been a great example where there wasn't very much third sector activity, but by investment and ongoing commitment, we've been able to really turn that. So I think we need to learn from that and look at the other areas of the city where the need is and help people get onto that long-term secure funding footing. But it's not going to be easy, but we're massively committed to making it happen.
Councillor Haigh.
Thank you. I'd just like to really come back to the report on page 29, where it talks about the barriers to volunteering. I think we all recognise that for many people, especially people who've been out of work for whatever reason, volunteering can be a really positive way of getting back into of gaining skills, of getting back into a pattern of work, of demonstrating their ability and building their confidence. So what do you think the barriers are? And do you think, for example, that investment in making the application process easier, so you don't have to repeat applications? If you look at the model where people are seeking paid employment, often it's you just upload a CV and then employers come to you. That's not, people could put up their skills so that organisations could approach them, rather than an over bureaucratic approach, or one that involves enough skills to actually fill out an application form, provide referees, things that people might not find necessarily easy. So what do you think those barriers are, and what can we do to improve that?
Thanks. It's a really important question. I think a lot of it is about the approach to volunteering in the first place being meaningful and equitable and inclusive. So a problematic element of volunteering is people sort of being used rather than celebrated. So even this last week, we turned down much needed money to recruit some volunteers for something because they weren't going to be equitably compensated for it. And that's a really difficult decision when you're sort of, fighting for your own budgets. But it is really important that within the strategy, and we have a fantastic volunteering strategy manager at Val, who is absolutely committed to this work. That the volunteering we give people is paid, so they're not out of pocket. It's done in a kind of moral way. We also have to recognise that volunteering done badly is not a route into an employment. And actually, again, just to mention the IPS Grow model, if you look at that, volunteering is sort of not suggested where it's something that's just almost going to be a waste of their time. But it is really important when it's done right. So for us, it's about making sure that we can make those processes more streamlined. One of the things we're looking at is single point of contact in terms of a platform, how that will work in the new world of the ISR contract. It will take some time to develop that and set that up, but I think we know that that's one of the things we need to do, and some of the money that we've got outside of that contract is to further work in terms of digital access to volunteering. So it's absolutely a focus for us going forward. The key message for me is that the volunteering has to be done as per the strategy in a really right way.
Thanks, Hannah. Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a point on talking about local people getting involved and the community committees, etc. In the outer northeast, the local care partnership works extremely well. I'm not sure what the experience is of other ward members around the table, but I attend those meetings, and we have planning meetings for various different things that we're actually trying to bring in, so the dementia awareness, etc., is one big thing. But I'm not sure that all community committees have people attending those local care partnerships. So if you are, if the next time you go to your community committee, can you ask and say who does go to the local care partnership for our area? There is a difficulty, and that they are not coterminous with other organisations. So for my Outer North East Community Committee, I've got to go to about 4 or 5 different LCPs to cover the whole area. So that is quite tricky, but I'm encouraging, as the chair, I'm encouraging other members to go to those meetings and get involved. So it's just really a comment about utilising those LCPs as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Harrington. I really appreciate that kind of recognition of how much has been done in that kind of outer northeast. Local care partnerships have been on quite a journey, if we're honest, in the city, but they're really coming into their own now with neighbourhood health. There's a huge amount of work being done to make that connection. And also we're seeing some of the, you're right about the boundaries. So, for example, some of the neighbourhood community teams haven't been coterminous, and Leeds Community Healthcare are working to make sure that they will be going forward. And I think the more we can kind of join those things up and make them logical, there is a real recognition that, you know, some of our boundaries don't fit where people live. So encouraging people to connect in through their local community anchors and the buildings and spaces. You know, it's through all of those things, isn't it? But thank you for that support.
Thank you very much, Pip. I'm going to draw the discussion to a conclusion. We have actually allocated more time than was on plan because the discussion has been so compelling. And we all have skin in the game, really, in making sure that we're optimising the performance of the third sector in the city. One of the areas that we might want to have a concentration on going forward, maybe for the work programme, is perhaps to take a closer look at Pride in Place and the theory of community power behind it, as the biggest tension in the conversation we've had today has been around resource, and it'll be interesting to see whether it is actually helpful for the government to tell us where our focus should be in our locality, and where consistent 10-year funding pots in one particular place, whether that's helpful or creates tensions in the wider city in terms of that resource equity that was talked about at the very beginning of the meeting. I think that would be an interesting area of investigation for us as a scrutiny board. And going forward, of course, the neighbourhood health discussion. I know Pip is very positive about it and is talking about how our local care partnerships are a great platform for enabling stuff to happen. I think it's also an area where there is very much not a consistent delivery across the city, and where we might need to have some further scrutiny in a different scrutiny board, maybe through health, to look at how we make sure that that developing agenda does bring equity along with it. Councillor Haigh.
Yeah, and developing from that point, Chair, and I think we've heard this today, where our NHS partners are looking to the third sector to deliver and in those benefits, those health benefits, that should be followed with the resources to do it, rather than just on you go.
Yes, and that is a continual area of tension in terms of the relationship between the council and our partners in the health sector. I seem to remember a particular amount of money that was promised every year for children's services, which never actually turned up, which had a serious impact on our budget. Anyway, we're going off script now. But just to conclude, it's been your input today has been very welcome, and we hope to take some of the ideas forward into more concentrated areas of investigation to hopefully enable you to do your work even better. So thank you very much. If anybody does want to have a comfort break before the next item, please indicate, otherwise we'll go... Right. Can we reconvene at 11:35, please? Thank you. It's now 25 to 12. We're going to go on to our next item of business, which is our annual performance report. This is a very important area for us to look at because, of course, our residents depend on council services being delivered to the optimum level wherever possible, and of course our council departments have set themselves some service expectations that are measurable, and that we as a scrutiny board can play our part to ensure that if they're not being met, we understand why, so that mitigations can be put in so that services can be delivered as well as possible. So we have quite a few people here today because it's covering quite a large part of the council's functions. So I'm going to go through a list in terms of the people who are here to help us have a discussion today. So first of all, Dennis Moody, who is chair of the Tenant Scrutiny Board. You're very welcome. We have Chief Inspector Anil Manda, who's going to give us perspectives on our community safety measures. James Rogers, of course, who is the director. And it has to be noted that this will be James's final scrutiny board because he is going to that wonderful land of retirement pretty soon. So please show your appreciation when we get to discussions. Adam Crampton is Head of Asset Management in Housing. We also have Paul Money, who is the Chief Officer for Safer, Stronger Communities. Lee Hemsworth, who is the Chief Officer for Community Hubs Welfare and Business Support. John Woolmer, who is Chief Officer for Environmental Services. Mandy Sawyer, who is Head of Housing and Neighbourhood Services. Ian Montgomery, who is Service Manager. No, not here.
Sorry.
And we have Kerry Murray, who is Head of Homelessness. And of course, most importantly, Ian Strickland, who is going to introduce the item, I assume, but also has helped to collate the information that we have here. So there's one more over the page, I'm told. Wrong. Holly Kemp, come on down. Business Development Officer. You're very welcome. Right, so I've introduced everybody for them, so I apologise that you haven't had a chance to do it yourselves. Do we wish to have an elected member introduction, or are we going straight to Ian Strickland? Straight to Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Just to give a quick overview of the report, from approach perspective, it's continuing from previous reports that we'll always look to continue from the previous performance report, so we look to tell that ongoing story. So we always reflect on the previous updates that the board have had to make sure that we've got ongoing accountability there. Again, always acting on feedback from the board to make sure that the report remains relative and it is iterative over periods of time. And also, which we mentioned several times during the report, that we'll always align to the work schedule, so we won't look to repeat any information that you've had recently. I think there's a number of instances around the recent lettings policy and other areas where the board had updates very late in 2025, so we'll just build on those discussions and any follow-up actions. The members will have hopefully seen a change to the design this time. The report's based on the new council plan and what we as a directorate are doing to deliver the priorities in the council plan, which was approved yesterday. So we've looked to make sure from a timely basis that we've changed so we can take that into account. And also as well, we have a change in dynamic regarding statutory performance indicators from April 2026. So we've given the board information on the new set of indicators, but also again for continuity, we've looked to maintain the directorate plan, KPI updates, and also information on some local measures which have been introduced alongside the new council plan. So there's lots of information in there, I understand, but we've looked to keep it reflective and thematic where possible. And then finally, in the cover report, we give a really quick overview of the four main themes of the new council plan. There's much more detail in the main report, but particularly around organisational effectiveness, we talk around a number of the areas of work that are going on around workforce development, developing our performance management framework and customer relations as well. So a really quick introduction there, but hopefully that explains the slight change from last time. Thank you.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Just for those watching and for those in the room, we are going to be going down the list of the performance indicators in a more structured way as opposed to a free-for-all for people to ask questions across the piece. So, and we're all going to start with our guests today, so that if they do so wish, once their item has been discussed, they may leave and carry on with their lives. But of course, they're always very welcome to stay and listen to the rest of the discussion. So first of all, we're going to discuss tenant scrutiny and satisfaction measures, which can be found on page 58. And to join us for that item, we have Adam Crampton and we have Dennis Moody, who is chair of the Tenant Scrutiny Board. Did anybody want to introduce?
If I may briefly,
yes?
Chair, thank you. Really grateful for Dennis joining us today. The Tenant Scrutiny Board is a fantastic kind of tangible example of tenants providing meaningful challenge and influencing the way in which the council delivers services for our tenants. Over recent months, that's included things like our approach to home surveys, preparations for the introduction and implementation of AWAB's law, and more broadly around our actions around social housing regulation and the consumer standards. So as a service, we greatly value the Tenant Scrutiny Board and the collaborative work that we undertake with the board and the insight that their scrutiny provides. So thank you, Dennis, and if there's anything you'd like to add around the work of the Tenant Scrutiny Board?
Yeah, I've been on the Tenant Scrutiny Board for about 4 years. It has all changed. We are introducing more new members. We are looking for diversity on the board, a wider range of people from the Leeds housing sector. So we know how they operate. The home survey that we changed, we looked at galoshes, which are shoes that go over your shoes, rather than the paper ones. With Leeds buying power, they can get them cheaper. But I wasn't aware, excuse me, I wasn't aware that the Asian community do not allow the people in the houses with shoes on. I wasn't aware that is some of their laws, and I think we've got to respect that. We've got to look at the Asian community. We need people like that on the board to help us fill these things, so we know what their culture is. The last time I spoke to you was on damp and mould, which is a year ago, I think it is. And damp and mould has come on in leaps and bounds. We've got Rob Goy coming to a meeting tonight to talk us through how he's gone on with the condensation boxes, which they have supplied for people that have reported damp and mould. Does everybody know what we're on about, the little boxes that collect the damp, the condensation in people's properties? They used to use them. They use them a lot in caravans. They're £2.50 for 4 at most bargain shops, so they're quite cheap. But the council is giving the people one each to try to get some of that damp out, that condensation out, and then they're pointing them in the direction of where to go to get them, rather than saying it's condensation, open the window. They are actually explaining it to them. And coming from that, the NHS have asked if they can use the training package that us and the council have put together for their team to do, which we've both said yes. So that's great, is that it is going out there. But we won't be able to do that without the tenant engagement team. They've put a lot of work into us, and we are working closely with them. We've then gone on to complaints. We've dealt with complaints. We've got home service. We've dealt with home service. We're now on with looking at training for new officers that come in and communications. We've had 4 different people so far at us meeting to discuss their knowledge just come onto the board and how they found it. Some find that sitting in front of a computer and clicking, they don't seem to take it in. Some of them prefer a classroom-based learning and some prefer hands-on. So we're looking at that to see what recommendations we can put forward to compensate everybody. I think that's it. Do you want to say what Monday either? No, do you want to say what else?
No, thank you, Dennis.
I hope that's enough. The board is moving on. No, thank you very much.
No, that's very helpful to know that you're doing that scrutiny work at that level to help add value to the stuff that we're doing on a strategic level. So thank you very much for your contribution. Councillor Haigh.
Thank you, and thank you, Dennis. I particularly welcome the comments you made about needing diverse voices on the board and how we listen to our tenants. One of the challenges I think I've found is that people no longer want to engage in the ways they would have done in the past through, say, TARAs or meetings or coming out to meet officers. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts about, is there something we could do differently as an organisation in terms of how we engage with our tenants and get that really important feedback on the service that we deliver to them?
I think I'm not sure Dennis caught all of that, Councillor. So if I may, just it was around how we really engage with our tenants more broadly through different means, and I think specifically linking that back to the Tenant Scrutiny Board, we kind of recognise that it's also a big commitment for people to commit to the Tenant Scrutiny Board. So one of the initiatives recently has been around sort of taster sessions for interested tenants about whether that's something that they might want to take forward. So there's been an opportunity for people just to kind of experience it without fully committing to it. I think more broadly, a lot of the work that our team and we mentioned Ian Montgomery and his team earlier, a lot of the work that their team does is around that wider engagement strategy, and both taking the feedback and then engaging with residents through various means, be that digital or face-to-face means. In the likes of the Tenant Scrutiny Board, we still write to residents and understanding those preferred methods of communication as well. So quite a broad subject for us to address, but we are mindful that people's preferences are extremely diverse and that we do need to account for those.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry if it wasn't clear enough earlier. But Dennis, do you have any views as to why tenants don't want to engage in those ways? And is there something that we could do differently if we aren't going to be having TARAs and supporting it? I know that resources have been withdrawn from that as well. Has that been a factor?
As I said, we've had a taster session where we check people from the tenants' voice panel. When we pick a subject, we go over to the tenants' voice panel and we ask for people from there to come onto the board to discuss that particular topic, which they do. And then coming from that, as we had a taster session, I think it was last week before, we had 20 people there. But unfortunately, they were good people, but we want some diversity. We don't want, but British white all the time. We want culture people on, and that's what we're trying to look at. We're trying to look at how do we get them to engage, and that's what we're working with the tenant engagement team.
Thank you very much. Any further questions on housing? Councillor Dowson.
Sorry, I'm looking at Dennis, and we know each other because we used to sit on HAP panels together, the housing advisory panels, which were the precursor to the current board. And linking in with the item we had earlier about volunteering, because everybody who sits on one of these panels is effectively a volunteer and giving their time freely. It's really difficult, I would imagine, to get people, if you're working, you haven't got the time, it's what time you meet, is it through the day or evenings? If you're not working, it's even harder because you're out there trying to earn a crust and getting jobs and so. So I'm just wondering on what Councillor Haigh said about meetings, whether the meetings could be moved around a little bit to make them more accessible to different communities. But also, I've got to say, I actually mourn the demise of the housing advisory panels because they were smaller forums. They were locally based. The people who came to them often knew each other because they were neighbours and so on. They had the same shops they went to and so on, the same doctor's surgeries, and it was really easy to form friendship groups. In fact, I'm still on the WhatsApp group that our HAP panel created, and we went out at Christmas, or we I don't think we quite made it, but we have our plans to go out going forward. And that helped because we knew intimately what the problems were in our area and how housing affected that. So now we have the community committees and the new committee structure on the community committees. I'm wondering whether people might be interested in extending that volunteering and having a housing focus sometimes at community committees. So it's probably not so much a question as opposed to a comment that we do need to do something, as Councillor Haigh said, to try and encourage more diverse communities to take part in what is a really important part of their lives, the home that they live in.
We do meet on an evening to compensate for the people that are working, but we are open to, we can move as meetings. It's not set in stone. So if more people want to come through the day, we'd hold one meeting through the day. We now have 2 meetings a month, where we used to just have the one. We have 2 meetings a month. So we can move as meetings around to compensate. And we've also got the internet, where people can come on and talk through the internet.
Thank you, Ms Moody. Councillor Harland.
Paul might correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe during the community committee review we did speak about having a housing champion rather than the skills and employment, which seem to have become redundant in many areas. So that may be something that Councillor Khan can take forward.
Thanks, that's very helpful, Councillor Harland. Does that conclude our discussions on housing? Thank you very much for your attendance, Councillor Harland.
Can I just say thank you to Dennis and the Tenant Scrutiny Board, which is really important about making us accountable. I've not had the opportunity to attend one of the boards yet, but I have met with Dennis and I'm very clear on what he expects from me going forward.
That's good to know. Everyone needs challenged to keep them on the toes. Right, so we'll move now on to Paul Money's section, which is primarily associated with community safety. Do you wish to introduce this, or does Chief Inspector Mander wish to comment? Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The next section essentially covers our community safety perspective. Colleagues in the room will recognise we work really, really closely with a range of partners across the council, but also particularly closely with West Yorkshire Police. So it's great that Anil can join us this morning. The areas that we tend to focus on in these conversations are laid out before you. I think it'd probably be appropriate, Chair, just to get into any questions or observations, if that's okay with yourself and members.
That's okay with me. So who would like to go first in terms of questions? I'll start then. If we look at page 62, we've just had a discussion around the third sector and the impact that Pride in Place might have. Now, the funding for that was associated with indices of deprivation, some of which are associated with a community's, the impact of crime on communities and populations. So you've mentioned here your approach to priority areas of Leeds. However, in the last index of multiple deprivation, some of our traditionally deprived areas have actually improved, which should give an indication that the work which has happened is having an effect. But other areas actually declined. So it would be good to understand if there is any correlation between the resource which is associated with neighbourhood policing teams, if that follows changes in the data around deprivation, particularly if it's associated with crime levels.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chair. And I know there's some, in general terms, there's some dialogue ongoing around the analysis of recent data sets, and in particular the recent IMD data set. And that analysis is ongoing to seek to try to understand exactly what it is that's happening in areas that are subject to some change. And from a crime and community safety point of view, I'm fairly confident, because of the nature in which we are tracking crime and antisocial behaviour in particular, working closely with colleagues in the police, but also benefiting significantly from an in-house performance and intelligence team, that those correlations will indeed be picked up, Chair. And at least in the short term, being in a position to dynamically respond to any particular increases or any particular trends that appear to be taking place in any given area. And there are a number of examples actually within the papers more generally about that dynamic response. We talk about problem-solving groups and other arrangements that we bring together and can bring together really quickly, with a view to dealing with any spikes or other issues. In terms of the longer-term relationship between deprivation, inequality, disadvantage and crime, I think that there needs to be that analytical sort of breakdown and understanding of exactly what's happening, so that we can be responsive. From a policing point of view, I do know, I wouldn't want to speak for Anil too much, but I do know there are arrangements in place to dynamically move resources to deal with particular issues, and there are other mechanisms the police can deploy to ensure that we are responding appropriately to any particular issues. So it's a bit of a multifaceted thing. The reassurance to you, Chair, and to colleagues in the room is dynamically we do and can shift resources really quickly into particular issues. Longer term, it's about really understanding from a deployment of resources point of view, be that across the council or the police, understanding the data sets, cross-referencing different bits of information and making sure we're being evidence-led in terms of our deployments. I don't know, Anil, if there's anything else you want to add to that in terms of the question.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Harrington, please?
It's just on the antisocial behaviour point, Paul. In the outer areas, there's been a huge increase in electric scooters and management thereof, and also quad bikes and damage to property in the parks particularly. Just wondering what's going on with that. And on Appendix 8, page 91, it may well be that the figures have been transposed, because it says December 23 to November 24, 8,902, December 24 to 25, 9,191, with a change, it states there is minus 3.2, but is it not plus? So has it not actually gone up?
Thanks, Councillor. Could you just refer to that data set again? I just didn't pick up the page.
Page 91. In the box at the top, it says the figures for 23-24 and 24-25, and it says the change is minus the 3.2%, but is it not an increase?
Does look like an increase to me, Councillor Harrington. So thank you very much for flagging that that with me.
Yes, just an error.
I'd agree with you. And so apologies for that. In terms of your substantive point about, well, I guess it's broadly about the antisocial use of vehicles, motor vehicles and electrically propelled vehicles. That is an issue that gets flagged with us repeatedly, particularly by members who I have no doubt, wherever you are in the city, you have seen an increase in such activity. We do have higher levels in certain parts of the city, but I recognise it's a problem everywhere. And we have sought to respond to that problem in a number of different ways. Notably, I guess, by the introduction of a citywide public space protection order, which seeks to give us some additional powers to act as proactively as we can to deal with such an issue. It is a priority area for us that our antisocial behaviour governance board is particularly focused on. We are looking all the time to ensure that our response to such issues is as comprehensive as it can be. I recognise how difficult this is for members. One of the challenges we do have is the ability to respond dynamically to incidents as they are occurring. There's a whole manner of safety issues associated with an intervention in those circumstances. So the preferred position we would adopt is to be proactive and seek to use what legislation is available to us to deal proactively with this issue. We're really dependent upon community intelligence and community information. And it seems to me that this type of activity tends, it's not exclusively, but tends to occur in local areas, often committed by local people. I know we get ride-outs and people travelling across the city, but we haven't seen too much of that, thankfully, in recent times. So it really is about us seeking to understand who's involved in this type of behaviour, where are the vehicles. There are numerous ways we can take receipt of that information, including anonymously. We'll always respond positively to it, and if we can proactively step in to stop this type of activity, I know police colleagues would prefer that because of the issues that are presented dealing with it as it's occurring. Just to mention as well, there is some relatively new legislation that's just being enacted concerned with antisocial behaviour that's bringing into force respect orders. We're just waiting on some guidance coming through in relation to respect orders, but that would be helpful for us in terms of strengthening our proactive powers to intervene with individuals involved in this type of thing sooner and stop it happening in the first place. That's probably the response I'd give you, unless, as I say, Anil, there's anything you want to add.
So, just in relation to the point you mentioned about quad bikes and off-road incidents, the off-road bikes team has just ordered 2 advanced off-road motorbikes, and they're due to be delivered later this month. The team are going to be trained on those, and hopefully they'll be deployed in spring this year, and that'll give the team a number of different tactical options to address those off-road issues with off-road vehicles.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Councillor McCluskey.
It was just to follow up on the scooters and the electric scooters being an absolute issue. It seems to be more a national law issue, because the first thing you walk into when you walk into Curry's is a rack of scooters for sale, and it's how do we get around that?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor, because you are right. This is something we're seeing nationally. I think the other issue, in terms of the scooters that you're seeing for sale in retail outlets, what we are seeing is individuals essentially increase the power of those particular bikes, which creates a bigger issue for us, because as far as we're concerned, they're akin to motor vehicles, really, aren't they? They're heavy vehicles. And there have been, in other parts of the country, a number of instances where there's been serious injuries as a consequence. It's a real significant issue for us. I wonder whether or not there is a need to look at some further legislation around the use of such vehicles. It's not necessarily something for me to champion directly, but bearing in mind we're talking about things that are akin to motor vehicles, I do wonder myself about taxation and insurance and licence obligations, and that may be something that we could maybe work with in terms of promoting a view maybe from Leeds with colleagues potentially in government. I really do take your point, and I think there is an issue that could be addressed in a more comprehensive way. And in fairness, that may already be a conversation that's taking place somewhere, but we would be keen to be involved in it from a Leeds point of view for obvious reasons.
Given the governance, isn't this something that our mayor should be taking forward on our behalf as the person responsible for policing within our locality? I'm not sure if you have a forum within which that can be discussed on a West Yorkshire level, Paul. We do, Chair. We obviously have a really close working relationship with the Mayor's Office, and in particular the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, who I know in conversations with colleagues across West Yorkshire has similar views in terms of the issue that such antisocial use of these types of vehicles is causing. Hence my observation that there may be conversations going on already. I'm more than happy to promote that view, Councillor McCluskey, on the back of your observations, though, and my sense that everybody would be kind of in agreement with that. I've always found that in terms of legislation, it's good to formalise conversations into proposals that can be adopted. So, Councillor Haigh.
Before I make my point, I think it might be useful for you, Chair, to write to the Minister, relevant Minister, and perhaps the Local Government Association on that topic to see what the national picture is in terms of legislation and to support the proposals that we've heard today. Anyway, moving on. Going back to the Pride in Place and Neighbourhood Improvement Plan, I note that there's a proposal to extend the good practice development developed in priority wards more broadly across the city, and I really welcome that, but I am interested to know about where that additional resourcing comes from, because that is additional resourcing that other wards have not had. And also there's a proposal to extend the work of the Neighbourhood Improvement Board to the two Pride in Place areas, the wards that are not currently covered by it. But given that the governance of Pride in Place is very different to the council deciding priority wards and allocating resources accordingly, how is that going to work? Because clearly the Neighbourhood Improvement Board cannot tell the neighbourhood boards what the priorities are, but would be having to respond to what the neighbourhood boards decide their priorities are. How's that going to work? Because that seems to be two very different governance structures.
Sorry, I missed that last bit, Councillor Haigh, was it?
It was an aside, Paul. Carry on.
Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor Haigh, and I think you and I have had at least an initial conversation about what I understand and recognise to be some of your concerns about the kind of interface between the local board and the Neighbourhood Improvement Board. I think the first thing that I'd probably want to say on this subject is you're absolutely right, and there's no intention to implied or inferred to take away any of the kind of local focus in New Farnley or in any of the other areas. It is absolutely right that local residents in those areas influence fully, absolutely fully what is needed in terms of regeneration or investment into those areas, and there's absolutely no intention to in any way dilute any of that. What we do see, though, is an opportunity around the Neighbourhood Improvement Board, kind of reflecting, I guess, on what it would be about 7 years now of integrated working in our priority wards, where we've got similar levels of deprivation, inequality, disadvantage playing out. And so there's some good practice in terms of how officers come together and integrate and support local communities. The other potential benefit, I think, in terms of some sort of overarching mechanism in terms of the 4 Pride in Place areas in particular is to identify where there may be, for instance, some really good practice that works in one area that actually could readily work in another. So it's really just about, from a council point of view, I think, more about coordinating ourselves in a way that adds best value to the local areas. It's absolutely not about seeking to, in any way, as I say, dilute local people who are best placed, we know, to say what's needed in a particular area. I hope that's reassuring. I know the proof will be in the pudding with this council aid, but obviously you'll be working, as other members will, really closely with us through this whole programme, and I know that you will be applying the appropriate checks and balances to that, which is absolutely right.
No, thank you. That's really helpful, and I think that clarity is the message that we need to put out into the community as well. I did also ask about the dissemination of the priority ward strategy across the whole city, which is in the report, and the resourcing of that.
Yes, so our current thinking, Councillor Haig, is that we have some scope within the budget envelope to create some dedicated resourcing capacity to each of the Pride in Place areas. We're working through a process to do that now. There will be links, obviously, with those officers and our communities team. We're essentially seeking to embed those colleagues within the team that are already running the priority ward work. Is there a
Paul, I'm not sure if there's some confusion. Yeah.
I understand that around the priority wards, but it says in the report the NIB will look to ensuring that learning and good practice developed in the priority wards is shared more broadly across the city and look at opportunities to lever in other resources to replicate this wherever possible. And I think that's a really positive thing, but I do just want to understand about the resourcing implications there.
Yeah. I guess that's that's an intent in terms of how we're going to seek to share the best practice and work more broadly in an integrated way. There is a piece of work ongoing across the council linked to the council plan around locality working. So there's a kind of separate, what I didn't want to do was necessarily conflate Pride in Place in particular, but there is a separate piece of work going on strategically across the council around locality working and seeking to develop, I guess, an operating model in which colleagues are working more closely together, particularly at the neighbourhood level. As I say, my concern was not to necessarily conflate that with the specific piece of work we're going to do within the Pride in Place areas. Does that address your question fully, Councillor Haig, or is there some further concern about that?
Sorry. That does address it, I think, because certainly from what I've seen since I've been a member, is that those where services come together to work in wards. That makes life a lot easier in terms of getting integrated and working and making sure that services are complementing each other rather than going off on their own paths. And I think if we can do that, actually we'll probably save resources rather than expend them, even if we might need to do so initially.
I think what would be helpful, Paul, is that this locality model that you've described in the abstract, we could have some detail of as soon as possible as it is developing, so that we can help influence its shape. Councillor Timmins.
Thank you, Chair. A few points on this. First of all, I'd like to say to Paul just that actually I think the work that you are doing, previously with Councillor Harland, now with Councillor Khan, in terms of community safety, is real beneficial to us. I'm coming towards the end of my second full year as a councillor, and actually I can see the practical difference this year compared to last year. I think that's important. Quite a practical person, so I like to see what action is actually happening. Just on, very briefly to touch on the nuisance off-road bikes, I think the general feeling is that we're not really grabbing the bull by the horns with this. Okay, it does take a lot of partnership working, and I think some of the changes within the law that's come in terms of police powers will be beneficial. I know in my part of the city, so the Outer West, there's also a piece around cross-border working between the two cities, Leeds and Bradford. I'm pleased to see that I know the police, the off-road bike team in Leeds and Bradford have got a meeting planned in to discuss how they can work better together. But I think it's also worthwhile us as a council seeing how better we can work with the housing associations across the border, the last back teams in Bradford as well, on a bit of joint work on that. In terms of the delivery groups, I was lucky enough to chair the Outer West delivery group last week. We had a real positive meeting. Rather than just being a meeting, we had a round table, so we weren't looking at data, we was discussing, this is the problem, okay, what can we do about it? And we were able to have a frank discussion, and coming out of that, we've got the bare bones of a plan to deal with certain parts of our priorities that were listed, and you know, hopefully in the next couple of months we'll have some action days within certain communities, with the police, with Forward Leeds, with the council, with housing, and the point I'm trying to make is that yes, we can change national legislation, but at the same time we're responsible for doing what we can with the means that we've got and using that to try and make a difference. So I think we need to take a little bit of responsibility for making things happen as well. And then my last point, just in terms of community cohesion, because that's the third priority, and the next delivery group that I'm going to be part of is on community cohesion. But I am finding it quite hard to understand how that delivery group's going to look and what we can do to include partners, but actually the communities within that. And if you've got any ideas on that, I would be very much appreciative of that.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Timmins, for all of that, actually. Thanks, there's very often little good news when you're talking about community safety issues, because we know there are perennial issues playing out in some of our communities, but it is appreciated you've observed that tangible difference and have been able to kind of reference that. So thank you for that. In terms of the well, I guess in terms of the issue that you referred back to with regards to the vehicles, off-road vehicles, electric vehicles, etc., and I guess to a large extent, any of these sort of issues that communities are experiencing, you are right, of course, that there's we need to look at this in sort of multifaceted ways. It's not just about seeking to influence, for example, legislative change. The approach we try to adopt is one that focuses on intelligence and information in the first instance. We absolutely work off the back of intelligence and information, and elected members are in a brilliant position. And it's great to hear, if I'm honest, how proactive you are on this particular issue of community safety, because working more closely with elected members, working ever more closely, I think is super beneficial to local communities, and in particular to cohesion. But just in relation to the crime and ASB issues, be it antisocial use of motor vehicles or not, the approach we're trying to apply here is around intelligence information. It is around prevention. We're seeking to prevent these activities taking place in the first instance. A lot of that goes on and doesn't get seen for obvious reasons because it's being prevented. Then it's about the intervention, and it's about enforcement where education doesn't work. So it is that multifaceted sort of attack, if you like, on all of those issues. Just in terms of the cross-border issue you raised, you're absolutely right. Criminals have no cognizance of boundaries and borders. We do, because of how budgets and organisations work. We are working as closely as we can with, particularly on the Leeds-Bradford border, because of some of the issues that you will be well familiar with. That Bradford have an operation steer side around a number of their antisocial use of vehicle type issues. We're working really closely with them. I know that the MPTs are very closely linked, and I know that members on the border are equally exercised, and so there's good relationships there. But you're right to flag it. It can create issues for us, but shouldn't, because of the issues that it creates. And with regards to the cohesion point, again, I think some useful observations. There's certainly work for us to do in terms of our approach to cohesion. I am seeing it in three different areas, if you like.
Paul,
one is the
could I suggest that we introduce that at the locality update paper in March, in terms of adding some detail to the issues that Councillor Timmins was making there, in terms of how we practically apply the cohesion agenda on a locality setting. Would that be useful?
I think it would. It's obviously involved, but I will pick up a conversation maybe outside the meeting, Councillor Timmins, with you specifically, if that'd be helpful.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Cunningham, was it something, a really quick one?
Thank you. Yeah, so mine is again around the nuisance vehicles, and I know you say that reporting is really key. I just wonder, I know that there's the non-pursuit protocols, but I just wonder how much we're looking to invest in kind of drone technology in order to kind of locate people and to potentially follow across borders as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Cunningham. We are delving here into police tactics somewhat, but what I would say is, from a community safety point of view, and working with local members and community committees, we are seeking to support our police colleagues with the tools that they need to intervene and address this particular issue. It's a complex one, but I'm not aware of the no pursue policy you allude to. Clearly there are safety issues in terms of interventions, but I know our police colleagues are developing tactical responses to these issues all the time. In terms of the use of technology, drones are that is a capability that's particularly being looked at, and there are other measures that are also being sought. The principal response to this is, as Anil has said, a dedicated policing capability with the right training, deploying into our communities of concern. But that technology is being looked at all the time. There are some technicalities with the use of drones in terms of the civil aviation legislation and other things, but I know that there is a capability, and I know that it's evolving all the time.
That was the wrong one. Thank you very much. We're now going to move on to customer contact. Thanks for your discussion on community safety. Lee, did you want to introduce the item? Members will be aware that we have had a scrutiny dedicated item to the customer improvements, so you don't need to over-explain.
No, thank you, Chair. I was just going to say briefly, I think the overall information that's provided here shows an improving position in terms of things like satisfaction. That's still maintained at sort of high 80% level, which is good given the volume of contact that we get. I think call handling times are coming down, which is a good thing. That's because we've employed more people, which is good, and things like that. So happy to take any questions, I think, but the general position is improving.
Yes, it's good to have some positive data. Do we have any questions for Lee on the customer experience? No, I think you covered us all very well when you came to report on it earlier on, so thank you very much. So let's move on to recycling and waste collection. We had an item at the last scrutiny board which was all about food waste, where we did discuss recycling and performance. I'm not sure if there's anything new to report, John, at this stage.
Okay, right, hopefully you can all hear me now, sorry about that. Yeah, you'll see in the performance key report there are the 3 or 4 key performance indicators that relate to waste and recycling. I've nothing really to particularly highlight here now. Obviously I came to the last scrutiny meeting, as the Chair mentioned, to talk about how the waste strategy is developing, particularly around the food waste collections. I'm now coming to a further meeting in the new municipal year, hopefully as early as possible, to bring the second part of that will talk about the dry recycling part of the waste strategy, that'll, in other words, the green bin. And as the Chair says, I'll bring some better quality and quantitative amount of information to that meeting, with it being slightly delayed, particularly around some of the glass statistics, which forms a key part of that approach. With regards to the performance today, you'll see the usual statistics provided in terms of bin collection rates, and we've had discussions around that before, around the appropriateness of that measure. And there's the usual statistics around recycling rate and the amount of waste that is either recycled, reused, or used for energy recovery. So in terms of those statistics, the recycling rate is slightly higher this year than last year. And I think it's just worth me pointing out that in this monitoring period for this year, that includes the spring and particularly the summer period of 2025, whereas you'll recall it was a particularly dry and warm summer, broke some records, and as a result the amount of garden waste that was presented for collection reduced by about 25% across Leeds, and that has a knock-on effect on the recycling rate. So if you added back in a more average garden waste collection tonnages and recycling into 2025, that would bump the recycling rate up to around 40-41%. It isn't, it is where it is, but I just thought I might provide that explanation, because some of you might have been expecting that to have gone up by more than a fraction because of this now includes glass in that performance indicator. So that just provides a bit of an explanation around that. I'm going to say hopefully we'll have a less dry and warm summer this year from a recycling perspective, but I think I prefer it to be dry and warm. And then what you will notice is there's a new indicator that's been put in for this year, and we're still working on some of the data collection around this to make sure it's a robust figure. But we've put in a figure following the new national measures around fly tipping. So fly tipping enforcement actions per incident. I think I've not got the page numbers here, sorry, but in Appendix 2 of the performance report, you'll see that that's provided. So again, that'll be interesting. I'm sure you'll be interested in that as a scrutiny board, monitoring that as we continue to report that to yourselves. There is a little bit of anomaly around that at the moment. So, for example, you'll see, if you look at last year's Q3 performance, there were 4,521 recorded incidents of fly tipping, but 4,701 actions. So we actually had more actions than incidents, which it throws up a question, doesn't it? How is that possible? So a lot of it is around the duplication at the moment, how we record stuff. So in both sets of data. So it will include duplicate reports and duplicate actions. So, for example, we might go and visit a fly tip, take some action, including removing it, but then also look at investigating it. And then that might produce, hopefully, in some kind of enforcement action that may either reduce a fine being issued by ourselves or go into court. So we just need to unpick that to make sure we're not over-duplicating, then over-reporting that. Similarly, the reports of fly tipping made by people will be duplicated. So we're doing some data cleansing around that, so that figure will be cleansed. But we thought it was still worth putting it in now while we do that work in the background. I'll leave it there, Chair, if that's okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dowson.
Sorry, I was just wondering about your relationships. I mean, we're really lucky, or not, as the case may be, to get a list every day of bin rounds that haven't been collected or streets that haven't been collected. It's very interesting because sometimes it's totally random and other times it's the same streets popping up again and again and again. So I'm just wondering about the relationship you have, because we're talking about cost saving as well, about having to go back and have collections to try and recover those and so on. So what kind of relationships and cooperation are you getting from people like parking services, where the lorry either is blocked from a back street or can't turn in, from highways around creating lineage to allow the bin lorries to get in, from tree services, because every now and then we get them overhanging branches and so on. There's all sorts of reasons why bins aren't collected, but it's those relationships I want to know about and how well they're working.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson, through the Chair. Yeah, those sort of relationships are good. We have processes in place to, so I'll pick each of those in turn. Our relationship with Parking Services is good. Matt Jefford, who heads up the Parking Services for Leeds, understands the consequences of people parking on yellow lines, particularly on street corners and in the back streets. I know particularly in your ward, Councillor Dowson, that's an issue in the Chapeltown area. And where he's able to provide the resource that can come and enforce at the right time, because that's what it's about timing it. There's no point in enforcing it the day or two before the collections. It's better than not doing it at all, but it's better done on the day of collection. But obviously then it needs doing very early in the morning before our crews arrive. So that relationship is there. Similarly with parks, forestry and potentially with CNT, depending on the solution to an overgrown tree or vegetation that's blocking access. Again, that relationship is there in terms of processing those referrals forward and then taking them forward. Again, we're relying on their own capacity and competing priorities to the response rates, but we certainly work positively with them. And indeed, with the yellow lines, we work very positively with the police too, at a local level, at a local policing level, where the police are in a better position to look at enforcing dangerous or inconsiderate parking that the yellow lines don't cover, which makes it difficult for us to enforce. So again, we have good examples of that, including in your ward, Councillor Dowson, where it happens. And our managers are developing good relationships with the police on the ground and getting support. But again, that's reliant on comparative priorities to the police in the area at the time. And we're respectful of that and understand that. So yeah, those and similar with highways. So on the final point with highways, Nick Hunt in Highways is working with us at the moment, really on looking at how we can put something in place next year that has a more structured way to looking at traffic regulation orders that are required for yellow lines that reduce the impact of inconsiderate parking on our ability to empty the bins. So we're working with him on that. We've worked with them before, Highways, on looking at local TROs. At the moment, the process is it's quite a lengthy one and quite a costly one, because it tends to be done on a citywide level and includes advertising, etc. So he's looking at working with us on something that can streamline that process to make it a lot quicker and happen during the year rather than once a year type stuff. Again, they're very supportive in that, and I often get contact through to my level from highway staff themselves of being proactively approaching us, particularly when they've had a conversation with members around problems that they're having and asking us for the evidence, because evidence needs to be there to back it up in terms of a TRO and yellow lines. So yeah, good relationships. But as I say, I have to emphasise, you know, we have to respect and understand the relative capacity of those services I've mentioned and competing priorities.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Thank you. Some probably related issues. So the end of day report is great when it comes. We've had a number of repeated areas repeatedly missed and not reported. We always go back to the team leader if we know who we are through refuse services. We've also got the joys of the hard to reach and the farms vehicles, and when one of those breaks down, nothing happens. And the service in general is great, but it's those gaps in communication that make it really difficult. Sometimes residents don't tell us for 2 or 3 days that their bins have been missed. They'll call or report online. They either get nothing back or they'll be told, oh no, we can't do a recovery collection. I had a furious email at the weekend because a recovery collection then did happen. We'd not had a chance to inform the resident. He'd been told by the contact centre on no account would it happen. So we've managed that. We've taken his feedback. We'll work with that. He's happy for that to be used. I won't name him now. But it's those bits where it gets really frustrating. Keen to support what we can to help with it, but it's those gaps in communication that make it really hard, and just it can take then a week for us to find out what's happened if we find out at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, it's an issue that's been raised at Scrutiny a number of times over the years, and my answer remains that I agree that that's still an area for improvement in the service. We've done a lot over the last few years in terms of improving the quality and information that's provided in the end of day report and making it a more useful document for yourselves and for the residents, and also making sure that that links up to the council's online reporting process so that the two systems talk to each other, which makes it even more frustrating then for when the information isn't provided at the end of the day to put on the system, because the system then works. So I do remain frustrated. That remains a priority for the service in terms of improving that further. I do believe that we've made improvements, but I agree that we need to make further improvements in the reliability of that information being provided.
Councillor McCluskey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John. Increasingly, non-collections in our area are due to utility works, digging up entire areas. Do they link in with refuse, or are you able to get prior information so you can make mitigation plans? Because they go on for 10 weeks.
As with a lot of things, sorry, Council, with a lot of things, it's not a straightforward answer, and it depends. So I'll try and generalise as best I can. As a general statement, yes, we do liaise, and we do get, I'm not sure if you as members, you get the list from highways of impending works, etc. So we do get that list, and that is provided to our managers as well. And they do look at that, and there is work that happens to liaise and make adjustments where they can. But obviously, you'll know the lists are quite big, and therefore not everyone works as it should. One of the things that does cause a problem is, and again, I'm sure as members you'll appreciate and experience this, the works don't always happen when they say they're going to happen and where they're going to happen, and in the way they're supposed to happen. And so with the best planning in the world, you can overplan it and you get there, and the blockage is a completely different part of the street you're expecting, or is a lot more severe than we're expecting. It's a different time, a different place. So we do, but even if we did that perfectly, it wouldn't work perfectly because of the reasons I've just said. The managers have got the relationship with highways and around planning around the permits to sites, and we do try and influence those. And ultimately, the team leaders, if necessary, and do, go on the site visits and literally talk to the contractors on site and try and come to agreements while they're there about how bins can either be pulled out, pulled back, a temporary presentation point, etc. So it's all of those things. It's a variety of issues. What we do appreciate is members working with us on that, as happens across many of the wards across the city, and working with us sort of pragmatically on that and helping with that, and trying to get those communications out to residents really helps. So it is a bit of a mishmash of solutions. Yeah.
Councillor Haig.
Thank you. I'd like to sort of talk about some of the issues that are commonly raised with us around communal bins. So where we have communal bins, often residents who are behaving perfectly in their disposal of their waste are really severely badly impacted by people who don't do that and contaminate, overload bins, etc., leading to non-collection of bins. And what can we do to address that issue? And also, and this is Councillor McCluskey and I, not the tallest members of the authority, and we were out looking into a bin store the other day, and he and I, who are, I mean, we're not the first touch of youth, but we're relatively capable, felt that we would not be able to put our waste into a communal bin because it would involve lifting a lid like this and lifting a bag of rubbish above shoulder height, above head height, in order to access the bins. So how do we decide what bins we're going to put out? And there was an issue with side waste here, but I did feel that it was genuinely would have been impossible for many people to access those bins properly. So what do we do in those situations where we're looking at communal waste provision in making sure that it is accessible for people, and also what do we do to deal with where there's issues being caused by particular individuals within, say, a block that are making life worse for everyone else?
Thank you, Councillor. So I think the two main issues that are out there around accessibility and then around the problems that are caused and how they're managed. Again, there isn't a one-size answer to this. It depends. It depends on the communal bins and where they're serving, whether they're serving the City Council housing stock, for example, and then the conversations with the housing manager and the housing officers in the area out there speaking to tenants and their behaviours and identifying the tenants in particular, which shouldn't be that difficult to do, theoretically. And similarly, if it's a privately managed facility, flats, apartments, whatever it might be that we're serving, again, we would say that the responsibility is with those agents to manage that with their tenants and respond to their behaviours so that the rest of the tenants, in the way you're describing, aren't penalised by their behaviours. So that's really what we'd expect, and obviously our role is to try and have those conversations and make that clear with those responsible parties. And again, the relationship with the team leaders should be that they find out who's responsible for those blocks of flats that those communal bins are serving and deal with those people. Again, there's lots of cases where the relationship between us and ward members is really critical in that you often help broker that discussion and know who it is to speak to, etc. So again, appreciate that and would encourage that wherever possible. I think in terms of the accessibility, I have to be honest, that's the first time I've heard that it's difficult to reach. I can take that away and look at it, but I think my initial response to that would be the bins are of a specific specification that they need to be and a pretty standard specification nationally. We'll have a specification that we put out in our contract in terms of bin replacements and what's required, but they'll need to be of a certain size to fit to be loaded on to the wagon. I can look at that. I suppose what you're saying is that we either need to look at less high bins or some kind of stool. which is a facetious sort of thing. I don't really mean that, but we need to look at something, don't we, if that's the case. But it's the first time, to be honest, I've heard of that. Councillor Nelson.
We might want to cover it under EDI, maybe through Equality Champions rather through Scrutiny.
Can I just come back quickly on that? Because at 4'10", I'm probably the most vertically challenged person in the room. I
I also have this problem at the tips because we're now putting bigger bins actually at the tips. I find it really difficult because sometimes they're at my eye height to actually lift bin bags up and items to put in the bin. So, you know, those slides help that you get, but they're not on every bin. So, you know, and I know the people who work at the tips are really helpful when they have the time. But I think we do need to look because, you know, not everybody's 6 foot tall. Thank you.
And we don't want to be short-changed in services, do we? Yeah.
Just very quick on that, Chair. Just sorry, as Councillor Dawson says, we have put slides in where we can, shoots in where we can across sites. But again, always happy to look at those things. As you say, Councillor Dawson, the default position should be that the staff themselves then step in and assist. But again, I have to stress that the case with this as well. Our overriding priority is health and safety for the majority of people, and if it needs to be of a certain height for that reason alone, then it needs to be that height, and then we need to look at workaround solutions to that, as you say, Councillor Dawson.
Thank you very much. I note that we're overrunning now, but we have taken the two biggest issues that we have, which is antisocial behaviour and bins. So let's see if we can rattle through the rest, if possible. So the next one is Lee Hemsworth and tackling poverty. Do we have any questions for Lee on the performance indicators for tackling poverty? I'll take that as a no. Thank you very much. Next we have Adam Crampton, and Adam will be taking on board all of the areas under his name. So you will notice that that is rehousing of residents from high-rise blocks, staff mental health awareness training, and then also the ones on the other side of the page, which are around homelessness, social housing stock condition, and selective licensing. Do we have any questions on those areas? Councillor Haigh.
I didn't do that. Why are we considering rebranding of Leeds Rental Services, Leeds Rental Standard?
Can I offer some background? We are going to have this come back in the summer, I understand, in terms of an item, because it's to do with...
Linked to the selective licensing scheme and the private rented sector, councillor. So yeah, forgive me, we'll come back with a response to that in due course, if that's all right, Chair.
Just to clarify, it's not changing the standards, it's the forum for private landlords.
I understand that. It's the rebranding I was asking about, because that involves spending money.
Oh.
Yeah, understood the question, councillor. I've got the question, but I'll come back to you with a response.
Yeah, I know there's no money there. Right, so, Councillor McCluskey.
Just in relation to the introduction of the Renters' Rights Act, are we seeing an increase in no-fault evictions prior to the Act being introduced?
Oh, thank you for the question. We're still seeing an increase in Section 21s to the Homelessness Service, and we anticipate that we'll continue to see those rise until the Section 21 is abolished in May. So at the moment, we're just treating the Section 21 cases as we would ordinarily. But in terms of preparation for the Renters' Rights Act, I'm working really closely with Mark Hyland's team to look at, how we're going to manage demand to service, illegal evictions, discriminatory practice, property inspections, all of the, duties and obligations that will be placed on us as a local authority when the Act comes into force. Thank you.
Just a and don't answer it because I'm sure it'll come back, and it is around damp. I think a lot of us have the sort of 1970s, 1980s houses with no front gardens and so on, and it's a real, but they suffer really terribly, as do a lot of other types of bill from damp, and with AWEB's law coming in as well. I'm just wondering around the performance, and even our representative from the tenants group mentioned damp, which isn't. It's an interesting one because there are lots of reasons and causes, but if we can have that potentially coming back just as for information, what we're doing about it, and how many complaints we get about damp and so on, that would be really interesting. Thank you.
If I may very briefly, thank you, Councillor. The AWEB's law was introduced in October. I think it would be a great opportunity when we've maybe had 6 months or some time at the start of the next municipal year for us to bring a more detailed report back on the introduction of AWEB's law, some of the statistics that we've seen from that, but also how it links into some of those sort of archetype pressures and how we can address that, if that's could be considered by the board.
Yes, isn't there an inspection ongoing as well at the moment, which would intend to conclude around March, which would be a good opportunity to feedback, wouldn't it?
That's absolutely right. So our inspection with the regulator of social housing is just about reaching conclusion over the next couple of days, and we're expecting the results of that sometime around kind of April, May time.
Right, Councillor Timmins.
Thank you, Chair. Just on this topic, I just wanted to touch on people who have suddenly become homeless through domestic violence. I've dealt with quite a few of these cases, and, well, they're horrible. And they've suddenly become homeless, in temporary accommodation, and so we get them on to the housing list, and it's been priority. But quite often, mixed with becoming suddenly homeless, there's quite a lot of anxiety, mental health issues that are coming along with that. But we can't use that as a second reason to up the banding even more to A+. And I just find that quite harsh, to be honest. And I'm just wondering if we've got anything on that, and you know, could we do anything with policy around that?
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of the amount of people who are approaching for domestic abuse, you're absolutely right. That is on the increase in Leeds, and it is on the increase nationally. We take a really customer-led approach to domestic abuse in Leeds. So we will always, you know, consider what the customer wants to do, whether the customer wants to stay where they are, whether the customer wants to access temporary accommodation, if the customer wants to go into refuge. We'll also look at things like sanctuary support, so providing security in their accommodation if they decide to stay where they are. We work really closely with Leeds Domestic Violence Unit as well, so we make sure that people can access support around their mental health or any other sort of trauma that will come from being in an abusive relationship. I understand your point around the trauma that comes from being in an abusive relationship, being seen as something secondary to the domestic abuse itself. We see that with very many cases that come to Leeds Housing Options. I think it would be incredibly difficult for us to award a Band A+ on all those cases. I think we'd find ourselves with a situation where we had a housing register which was, you know, had really high numbers of people with Band A+ because of the complexities of very many customers that are coming to service. But I'm not sure if that fully answers your question.
Yeah,
it's certainly something I could take away and spend some time looking at and coming back on, if that would help.
It does, and I do get that. But what I've also found is what you've talked about in terms of the third sector partners. they're not very easy to access sometimes. You know, there's a 6-week waiting list often, and that just proves the point of what you said, it's on the rise. But 6 weeks when you've gone through such trauma is quite difficult. Maybe we need a bigger look at this as an organisation, not just with housing but with our third sector partners, how better we can support people who have been going through this.
Thank you. I'm really happy to take that away and have a look at that, and thank you for raising it.
Thanks. And of course, that was one of the performance indicators that came under the community safety umbrella as well, didn't it? So this might be a conversation to take to the Mayor again, because of course she's very concerned about the safety of women and girls, and this would fit into that area of progress. Councillor Harland.
Just to say, I think, again, Paul might correct me if I'm wrong, that we do now have a member from Housing on the Violence Against Women and Girls Board. That was just recently, so I'm sure that that will be discussed at length there.
Paul.
Yes, not to correct Councillor Harland, who's correct in her observations there. But just you're right, Chair, to make the link. Obviously, we work really closely with Kerry and the team. I think Kerry's approach is the right one. We do obviously prioritise victims of domestic abuse for very obvious reasons, but there are other arrangements in place that do support victims, such as our MARAC arrangements. I will though pick up a conversation with Kerry and link back in. We have the Domestic Abuse and Local Partnership Board, so we have a mechanism in place to explore this in more detail. So that may be where we go with it, and then any further update here can be done in due course.
I think it's useful to take up Councillor Timmins' point about the third sector organisations who are maybe under pressure to deliver services if their resources are limited, because it might be that they just need more resources, and there are things like the proceeds of crime fund which could be channeled positively to outlets such as those. Anyway, I'll leave that for you to develop after being prompted by Councillor Timmins. Thank you. We now move on to Councillor Khan, because you wanted to come in, didn't you, at the end of the housing discussion points to comment.
Thank you, Chair, and it's been very productive meeting this morning, and thank you, members, for your questions and answers. And I want to welcome Chief Inspector Anil, and also want to thank Chief Inspector John McNiff, who's been leaving us, and and he has been a fantastic officer, and I worked with him last 15 years from East Leeds, and then he came to Leeds Central, and I worked really closely, and he has made a massive impact. And the relationship between West Yorkshire Police and Leeds City Council, Chair, is excellent. And I think that's why we're overcoming those challenges. And as you know, the last 14 years, we had massive cuts, 14 cuts in local authority and also in police. So despite we are delivering those services in our locality, just on a few things I'm going to pick up on pride and places, and the members are well bedded in those localities. You are eyes and ears in those localities. We will be having those conversations with where the pride and places in 4 places taking place. And finally, I just want to say, Chair, Councillor Haig's suggestion about the letter to the Minister, I think it would be good to send a joint letter from myself and you going about the new legislation of e-bikes and other issues as well. And finally, I just want to sat next to me, James Rogers. I want to say a huge thank you, James, for supporting me as well in my new role. You've been in Leeds for services for the last 40 years. 41, sorry, apologies. 41, and we're really going to be missing you, and you have made a great impact in our city, and thank you for your service, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Many thanks, Councillor Khan. So no comment on housing. So just to wind up, rather than wind you up, we have one area left which still hasn't been looked at, which is neighbourhood health hubs. But as we have had that mentioned earlier in the discussion, and the expectation that we will be discussing that at Scrutiny, whether it's at this forum or another, but since it's turning up in our performance figures, it looks like it's us, then I look forward to having that conversation later on, unless you wish to add to that, Lee.
No, it's just to say that obviously there are a few sites, mainly regional, that are part of the pilot, citywide pilot, and in the papers there's a link to a video which is really good if you get time, if you've got a few minutes to look at, in terms of showing the art of the possible, I suppose, in terms of that neighbourhood health approach.
Thank you very much. So, I think we've got to the end of the performance indicators. Thank you very much. And we move on to our final item. But besides Councillor James Rogers having his last meeting here, we also... Sorry, that was a Freudian slip, wasn't it? Sorry, you're just such part of the furniture, James, over the years that you know. Yeah, it has been a long meeting, not late. But also, of course, this is the final scrutiny meeting for Councillor Anderson, who has been a long-term chair of the meeting as well as a committed member of it. And we wished him well, and for Caroline going forward, as they won't be standing again for election, and they're going to be enjoying that lovely retirement that James is going to be enjoying as well. So thank you for your service as well, Councillor Anderson. So the final item is next meeting, which is on the 12th of March. Thanks very much for your attendance. Oh, we're only half an hour over.